Welcome back everyone. As most of you know, Apple just went ahead and released their 14-inch MacBook and their new 16-inch MacBook, and you may be trying to figure out which specific MacBook you want to pick up. Now, I do own both of them. I pretty much own the base models of all of them. So depending on your usage, you may want to get the 16-inch one, the 14-inch one. Now, performance-wise, technically speaking, you could get a 14-inch MacBook that is more powerful than a 16-inch MacBook and vice versa. It just depends on how much money you have and how much you want to spec out these MacBooks. The base starting price of a 14-inch MacBook is $1999, where the base 16-inch MacBook is $2499. So there is a little bit of difference. There's a $500 difference between these two. So again, if you want to save more money, the 14-inch MacBook may be the better way to go. If you want to, get a more powerful MacBook, that, can do everything, that 16-inch MacBook may be a better way to go because you do have that high performance mode and high power mode on that 16-inch MacBook that the 14-inch one doesn't have right now. Maybe they'll add a software feature later on. But one of the more interesting things about these MacBooks is the similarity between them. Like I mentioned, they both have the same chipsets, the M1 Pro or the M1 Max. They both support it. So you can, like I said, spec out the same amount of RAM and all this other stuff between them. The main difference is the body size, the battery life, how big of a screen size there is. Other than that, they're very similar. Now on the outside, you have pretty much the same type of style, Apple logo up top. You actually do have the same amount of ports on the other sides, which is pretty interesting. I was not expecting them to do the same port selection. If you remember, with some other MacBooks, they've kind of changed up the ports between the two models. So this time around, we have the same exact ports and we have crazy I/O, which is so amazing. You have SD cards on both, HDMI ports on both, MagSafe chargers on both, and you do have USB Type-C ports, 3 of them, 2 on one side and then 1 on the other. I'm a fan of that. I like that a lot. I would have loved to see 2 on both sides, but it's totally okay. We get the SD card slot, and I'm totally okay with that. Now, I will tell you, the size difference, as you can probably see on the screen, it is a pretty big difference. The 14-inch MacBook is thicker than the 13-inch one, which I was coming from, so it was definitely a little bit of a different setup. The 16-inch one, though, it's a pretty big MacBook. Not only is it way bigger, it's also noticeably thicker. That original 16-inch Intel one was actually pretty thin for the size that it was. This time around, it is actually a little bit bigger than you may expect. So if you're not okay with handling a big MacBook, if you plan on throwing these things around or you plan on traveling a lot, picking up a MacBook like that 16-inch one is probably going to do you better in the long run. And that is probably the MacBook I would recommend you to pick up if you want the most amount of performance and if you're stationary and you don't plan on traveling. However, if you do plan on traveling and you plan on taking MacBooks with you and you want a light kind of portable laptop, that 14-inch one may be the one for you, but honestly, you may even want to look at an M1 MacBook Pro, the 13-inch one, because that one is the best of both worlds in my opinion. Now, opening these things up, you will see, like you saw before, the 14.2-inch Liquid Retina XDR panel on the 14-inch one and a 16.2-inch Liquid Retina XDR panel on the 16-inch one. So there's a 2-inch difference between these two, and 2 inches is a pretty big difference between these two MacBooks if I'm being honest. You have the same type of setup, so you get the same type of display, same type of ProMotion at 120 Hz, same notch, which I'm totally okay with, no touch bar on either one of these MacBooks. The keyboards are very good with a black background, which looks beautiful, and that trackpad as well. So between both, again, you're getting the same type of setup. It's just you're getting a bigger setup on that 16.2-inch one. Now, like I mentioned, these two things are so similar. They're both going to be lasting the same amount of time in terms of software. Because they have that same chipset, it's not like the 16-inch one, just because it's more expensive, it's going to outlast the 14-inch one. In terms of macOS updates, they're going to be lasting the same amount of time. So keep that in mind, and potentially, Apple Care Plus and all that stuff is going to be the same exact thing between these two MacBooks as well. Now, on top of that, like I mentioned before, you can spec these things out to be the same exact performance. So you can spec them out to be up to 10 cores on the CPU, you can go up to 32 cores on the GPU, and you can go up to 64 gigs of RAM and get 8 terabytes of storage on both of these MacBooks. So there's no point in doing a performance test or something because it just depends on which specific MacBook you get. Just do keep in mind that the base model 16-inch MacBook technically is more powerful than the base model 14-inch MacBook because Apple does have like an M1 Pro Lite chipset inside of the 14-inch one, but again, you can spec them out to be the same exact performance. And that kind of leads me to the performance section, which is amazing on both of these MacBooks. In my opinion, these things can really handle everything you throw at it. And I do think if you're somebody who wants to pick up a MacBook and move on with their life, getting something like a 14-inch or 16-inch MacBook with the M1 Pro or M1 Max chipset is going to be beautiful. They're going to be just so future-proofed. I've personally owned my M1 MacBook Pro for I think about 7-8 months now, and it's been a very good ride. I've had a great time with it. Although, like I mentioned, it wasn't perfect, it pretty much handled everything I threw at it. And if these M1 Pro and M1 Max chipsets are any better, it's going to be amazing what Apple's going to be able to do with them. So for sure, when it comes down to both of these MacBooks, the performance is not something I would worry about. You know, whether you're a student, I mean, I'm going to tell you, if you're not planning on doing super crazy intensive gaming and editing 4K at 60 all the time and producing tons and tons of music, you're going to be perfectly fine on both of these MacBooks. To give you some perspective, I make I think anywhere from 10 to 15 videos a day on 2 YouTube channels. I do edit my videos in full HD, so 1080p, 30 frames per second, nothing crazy. And my M1 MacBook Pro has been able to just constantly just export these videos at a rate that is beautiful. The fans don't ramp up, and it's been an awesome experience. I will go back to back on exporting these videos, and my M1 MacBook Pro 13-inch one was perfectly fine. Now with these 14-inch and 16-inch ones, if you're not planning on doing that type of level of exporting and everything, these things are going to be more than enough. My 13-inch one was more than enough for me. So I do think between these two performance-wise, you're going to be perfectly fine. Now if you want like a Windows machine or something, I'm not too familiar in that space, so I'm sure there's some really good machines there. But the 14-inch and 16-inch ones, like I mentioned, if that chipset is better than my M1, it's going to be more than enough for a majority of you watching this video. So in terms of that covers it up there in the performance segment. Now I do want to note one very interesting thing between these two. So the battery life is one of the bigger differences between these two as well. So besides the performance and besides the bigger screen, you are getting a little bit better battery life on that 16-inch MacBook Pro than on that 14-inch MacBook Pro. So based off Apple's estimates, they do say that you're going to be able to get up to 21 hours of battery life from your 16-inch M1 Pro or M1 Max MacBook Pro versus the 17 hours on the 14-inch MacBook Pro. So again, this is totally up to you. Are you okay with having a little bit of less battery life? Actually, it's kind of a lot, but it's not a crazy amount. I personally do think that the 14-inch MacBook Pro is still going to be more than enough for a majority of people out there. And I do think if you're getting something like the 14-inch one, you're going to be more than enough, and I'm actually super okay with it. Now with something like the 16-inch MacBook Pro, that is going to be very good as well. I mean, that's going to be probably some of the best battery life for sure. Again, is it going to be perfect? I don't know. I'm sure there's MacBooks and laptops out there that are better than the 16-inch one, but between these two, the bigger difference besides the body size and everything and besides the price tag is probably going to come down to the battery life as well. So in terms of that covers it up there. And to kind of sum up this comparison, I'm going to be honest, if you're planning on picking up something like a 16-inch MacBook Pro, I will tell you that is a really good option. I would definitely recommend picking that up, but at the same time, I would highly recommend picking up the 14-inch MacBook Pro as well. If size wasn't an issue here, I would highly pick up the 16-inch one just because of the better battery life. That's probably the main thing going for it, but I don't know, I'm kind of indifferent between the two. I currently own both of these MacBooks, and I don't know which one I plan on using as my main MacBook. I like the portability of the 14-inch one, but even that, I love the portability of my 13-inch one, and the 14-inch one seems to be a pretty different design to kind of get used to, and I'm like, I might as well get used to a 16-inch one just because it is the bigger one with better battery life and it's more area for the screen and everything. But I really don't know. I'm going to have to kind of decide which one I want to keep, but I'm definitely going to tell you between these two, there is no wrong decision. You can pick up a 14-inch one or 16-inch one. This design is not going anywhere anytime soon. They're going to be supported for many more years. And if anything, the notch is going to be here for many more years as well. So in terms of that covers up this comparison. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.